Are you struggling with roadblocks as a woman in the challenging and constantly changing world of corporate America? If you feel stuck in your career, you may be holding yourself back and may not even realize it. Prepare to be enlightened by the meaningful discussions here at the No Woman Left Behind podcast. Each week, gather the insight you need to break down those walls of limiting beliefs. Unleash your full potential and unlock the leader within. Listen to raw conversations with corporate women as they share inspiring stories with the purpose of obtaining their dream career and living a truly fulfilling life. Here's your host, Rosie Zelinskas.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the No Woman Left Behind podcast show. I'm Rosie Zelinskas, your podcast host. Today, I am having a conversation with Laurie Swanson. Laurie is going to help us identify when it's the right time for you to change careers. So I'll tell you a little bit about Laurie. Laurie's core belief is aligning your career with your true nature when your inner motivations, desires, and values are in sync with your outer actions is the path to living an inspired life. Laurie was a coder early on in her career, and she shifted to technology recruiting and technology sales. She became an entrepreneur and founded the Lasso Corporation, which evolved into InspiHER Tech, expanding into true nature, career, and job search coaching. Laurie's mission is to bring inspiration, confidence, equal pay, and opportunities to women working in technology through a spiritually centered approach. Laurie is a personal and spiritual growth junkie who never says no to hearing your miracle story and is happy to share one of hers. Just ask her, she says. Well, Laurie and I have a lot in common when it comes to spiritual and personal growth because we are definitely both junkies when it comes to that. And Laurie also went to the University of Texas. I was just in Austin, Texas, a couple weekends ago. So we're going to shift a little bit on what we're going to talk about with Laurie. Laurie is going to talk about the 4 stages of the career cycle. So stage 1 is career disruption. Stage 2, career contemplation. Stage 3 is career discovery. And finally, stage 4 is career love. So if you are not happy in your career today, stay tuned for this very powerful and insightful conversation. So Laurie, thank you for being here. And I'm going to just start off the bat. How did you come to be a true nature career coach? And how did you come to help women in tech find their passion?
Well, first of all, Rosie, thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be here. Love, of course, you and all the work that you're doing for women, professional women, in advancing their careers. It's so important. And for me, so how did I become a true nature career coach, and how did I, specifically help women in tech, I think is what you asked me. Where to start? So I guess I'll start with the women in tech side of things. So I was a woman in tech. I started my career as a programmer, and that led me eventually out of heads down coding, which wasn't my passion, and into recruiting technologists, technology leaders, technology, people in technology adjacent careers. I always say, today everyone's a technologist in some way, shape, or form. You just can't get through life without an iPhone, right? Or a Samsung or something. So Android. But recruiting really was my passion for a very, very long time. I was a business major from the University of Texas with an emphasis on information technology. So that blend was, already there of really a high interest in business and how businesses work in different industries. And then, being a technologist myself and having been in a very male dominated field and seen how that worked and doesn't work, especially for women, to be able to help companies build teams and then, really focus on the women in the field and, and being a woman technologist, there was already that connection there, right? And so it just naturally, just like I think for a lot of people, your career sort of naturally evolves sometimes in spite of yourself, but for our benefit, right? And so then through the years, I started my own firm, and I continued to do recruiting, helping, primarily in Northern Illinois and Southeast Wisconsin, helping companies from multi-billion down to scaling startups, build their technology teams. But again, with this emphasis on hashtag hire more women in tech,
Yes.
bringing, you can't have women in the boardroom until you have women on the executive team. You can't have women on the executive team until you have women in leadership, and you can't have women in leadership until you give them the hand up into the organizations. And that starts with having a slate of interview candidates that are, diverse. And that's really where, as a recruiter, I always thought I can really make sure that that's happening. And then, as I had kids and I continued to run my business full time, but I was also, volunteering at my kids' school and volunteering in my community. And but there was points where I started to think about, well, what's next? Like once the kids are, not fully formed.
Yeah.
I don't know if we're ever fully formed, right? But
Right.
once the kids are, more launched, and my, their need of me has reduced, do I want to go back full board into growing my recruiting firm? Because I had been, 12 people. And then as we relocated out of downtown Chicago into the suburbs as my kids were growing up, and, for, again, family reasons. And I had a smaller staff, but was I going to grow it again? Was I going to keep it small? It was I was coming to a career crossroads. And in that process, I really started to focus on and what I do, which leads me right into what is a true nature coach, right? I started to focus on what is, how do I reconnect? Because our essential self, our true nature, never leaves us. It's just life happens, and it carries us, and sometimes it's carrying us right down our true nature, river. Other times we're off into the side, and we know it, right? We know it when we're off. We could talk about that a little bit more, but and so I really started to look at, well, how have I disconnected from what I consider to be my true nature, my essential self? And there's certainly signs that you're disconnected. But when I think about, true nature career, I can break that up into true being genuine and authentic, right? That authentic self that everyone talks about these days. Nature being organic, elemental, like elements, like, when you're in a true nature career, those elements are there. The air, like your career feels light as air, the flow, like it's not paddling upstream, but you're going with it. The fire in your belly, that, get out of bed enthusiasm that happens when you're connected to that the nature part of your true nature. And then of course, earth, which is the foundational, like that you're solid, that you're not, in that quicksand all the time and trying to get your footing. So I knew that as much as I love recruiting and still do, and of course, being an entrepreneur, that wasn't going to change. But I also knew that there was a way in which I had started to shift in what I consider my mission for women in tech and tech adjacent careers, is that connecting of your inner motivations, your desires, your passions, your values to your outer actions.
Right.
And And so I knew that even though I was, and when you think about aptitudes, which are part of, again, sort of that inner side, those skills and gifts and abilities that you have, that you've developed, um, using them, may, like, as a recruiter, again, boy, that served me for a very long time,
Right.
until it didn't, until I started to feel some of those, get some of those signals that that my evolving essential self was now sort of off center from my true nature career. And when I think about career in that true nature career, your career really is your form of service. I always say that, but it's not just service to others. Most importantly, it's service to yourself. So you're serving others and serving yourself at the same time.
Oh my gosh. So you said a ton of fantastic things. And the true nature career coaching is perfect for the conversation that we want to have today, because I am wanting people to be able to connect to their essence, their skills, like you said, everything, like their aptitudes, so that when they are in the career, they do feel that fulfilling feeling. Because it is the worst when you know that you're in the wrong career, and maybe you graduated in something that you weren't really excited, but you still went through with it. There's so many people that I talk to that are like, oh, I became a lawyer because my parents were lawyers, or I became a doctor because my parents were doctors. And so the true, going back to your true nature is so important. Well, so I work with women that are in corporate and that already know what they want to do. If they're at least confident that they're in the right job. But sometimes, like you said, life happens, things happen. So when you're in a position, how can you tell that you are engaged? How can you tell that it is the right position for you even today?
Yeah, great question. So, first of all, not every day is puppy dogs and rainbows. We all have our, um, frustrations, frustrating employees, frustrating bosses, frustrating projects, frustrating vendors. We all have that in our career. And those things should, and I don't often use that word, come, they should be not the norm, right? First of all. So how do you know? I really, again, because I'm very much on this inside out sort of approach, is first of all, there's a feeling. You don't have that when you get out of bed in the morning. There's lethargy, there's frustration, there's boredom, that sort of, low level anxiety might be there. Those sorts of things are happening more consistently. And sometimes we're sort of aware, but we ignore it.
Yes.
Keeping our heads down. And like you said, it's like, for me, the job I came out of school doing, absolutely, I didn't really know. I think a lot of people get into sort of that, what I call your cultural expectations job, right? The job that your parents think is good. My mom, literally, I hear her today, go into computers, there's money to be made there. And I'm like, oh, okay, so, and it wasn't bad advice, right? It wasn't bad advice, but ultimately, it wasn't, I think her, vision of what I'd be doing and what I ended up doing with relationship to the technology industry are completely different. So there's these feelings of low level anxiety, low level stress, boredom, lethargy, even low level, when lethargy bordering on, situational depression, perhaps.
Yes.
And which I, fully admit I felt at one point. And also, there could be absolutely external actions like overeating. I call it Xing, you fill in the blank, overeating, overdrink, you get up in the morning and you're sort of excited about the day. And by the time you hit the train on the way home, you're like, where's that bottle of wine? So overeating, over drinking, over analyzing things, like especially when you talk about women in tech who are already naturally, skewed towards the left brain. I'll call it left brain, even though, both sides do this, but the analytical, the processing, the data, the science, the show me the results, the facts. They're already skewed that way. And so then they're trying to figure out, how come this isn't, how come I'm feeling like this? What's happening? So over analyzing things. And I think just overcoming, like it feels like every day you're having to overcome something.
Yeah.
That's very clear, very, very clear sign. You're snapping at people, more than normal. You're finding less joy and other activities that used to bring you joy, or less desire to even do them, because you're just, tired.
Right.
And so when those things are happening and you can't really say, this is why. This project is just a drainer, but it's time boxed, but if it's sort of like, okay, then, and the hard part is, if you've been in a career that you've been passionate about, it's hard to believe that maybe it's time for a change. It's hard to believe that, wait a second, I chose this, I've been in this, I've loved this, what's going on here? And if you've ever read the book by Gay Hendricks, and I tell your audience, read it, The Big Leap. He talks about these levels of, the zone of excellence versus the zone of genius. And that zone of excellence is really, you're good at it. People look to you and think, wow, she's my go-to person. And doesn't that feel great? Yet you're drained, you're over Xing, you're bored. Yet I'm in my zone of excellence. But the next thing up, which really starts to push against that comfort zone, is your zone of genius, which is your true nature career today. Everything you've brought forward, and now something different, right?
Yes. So I do know that occasionally I'll hear someone say, oh God, I'm dreading Monday because I have to go to work. And I think that is a key indication that it's time for you to do something different, because you feel all those feelings like you just said. And that's no good. And I know there's an old statistic by the Gallup World Poll saying that 70% of people are not engaged in the work that they do. And that's just so terrible when you're—
And that's still true. That poll they do every 2 years, and those numbers have really not changed much.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah.
Okay, so what I'm hearing you say is that it really is never too late to change a career. Now, the next thing that I think of, especially when someone is established in their career, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to start all over again. Well, how do I do that? So let's talk a little bit about that. When you do decide, okay, I need to do something different, what are some 2 or 3 steps that people can do to start on that journey of transitioning?
Yeah. So, I mean, the first thing to notice, and I think, they'll have information how to get my website. And I have a quiz on there that talks about sort of the 4 stages of a career change cycle. And that first stage is career disruption. Now, that could be by circumstance or choice. So in some cases, you're laid off, your company's relocating to Boca Raton, and you're like, well, we're not going to Boca Raton, right? And so by circumstance, you're sort of thrown into change, into an opportunity for change. But also could be by choice. Maybe you're like, I'm going to take off a couple years because I can to pursue my MBA. And during those times, people can spend a lot of time reflecting and evaluating or sometime, I mean, of course, we got to pay our bills, right? So there's
Right.
often some sort of fire under there. But sometimes it's choice. And you start to, in this first stage of career disruption, sometimes there's grieving that needs to happen. Sometimes there's anger and frustration that needs to come out because it hasn't been your choice. And other times it isn't so overnight, but it's those feelings that we were just talking about, that those scary Sundays, that they're dreading Monday, right? And they're not really sure why. That's all part of that career disruption. And then you move into career contemplation. And in career contemplation, this is, again, not a time where you spend a lot of time doing outward actions. You may work a little bit on your resume, you may work a little bit on your LinkedIn profile, but it's very much about going inside. So that stage is so important. The dream, it's, again, accessing, moving out of the data, the logic, the analytics, into your imagination. That's where real freedom lies, right? Imagining possibilities for yourself, imagining something different. That's what happens in that stage. Then you move to stage 3, which is career discovery. And in career discovery, that's more outer actions. You might be doing informational interviews, going to more networking events, those sorts of things. And then finally, you're in career love. And there's certainly, and that's, working with someone like you, Rosie, that's a perfect time, because they're not, there's also a perfect time earlier than that to work with you. But in this case, what if you're pretty happy in your job, but there's still more to do during that stage, that I think a career coach. So that's the first answer: get a career coach, right?
Yes.
Hire us. But career love, that isn't just sit back and put your feet up. There's plenty of cool things you can do there. And so I think that people often realize that they think in stage 1, well, if you get laid off, then they'll jump right to, I gotta start interviewing, and they skip right over this contemplation piece, and that could lead them right from a frying pan to a fire. And then they're sitting there, 6 months from now in a job, and they're still feeling drained.
Yes.
And so I suggest that take a beat, give yourself some time to dream a little bit, taking in everything you've learned, because the person you were at 20 is not the person you are at 40. Right. You've grown, you've changed, you've matured, you've evolved. Life is a constant evolution, a ongoing process. There is no finish line. And so realizing that and that's why really understanding that there's no missteps either.
Yes.
You may think that job that you took for 6 months, is a real horror on your resume. It's not. There's gold in them. There are hills to be mined. So I would say hire a career coach, and then do the quiz on my website to recognize what stage you're in. And then, give yourself a minute or more to dream and imagine and where have I, ask yourself questions, where have I let go of, my dreams? Where have I disconnected from the things, from my core values? Are you working for a company that you don't believe in their mission?
Yeah. So I love the contemplation piece. And I also know that as part of the contemplation piece, sometimes the recommendation is to kind of go back and really think about the things that you enjoyed as a child.
Yeah.
So you kind of have to go way back. And did you love music? Did you love to, paint, art, whatever? But I think you're absolutely right, because that imagination, that creative contemplation is going to be really what drives your happiness down the line.
Well, it is your key to freedom.
Yes. Oh, I love that. Key to freedom. I know you also said there is no finish line, which this is kind of a tangent conversation.
Sure.
But I recently heard that there's even stages when you retire from a corporate job because you were this, whatever, you were in leadership. Yeah. I heard a specific story where there was a woman who was a psychiatrist. And so she was this really well-renowned psychiatrist. And then all of a sudden she retired, and she was, in her head, nothing. So
Yeah.
there's a whole other stage. So to your point of no, there is no finish line. Even when you retire from work, you still have to create yourself again. So it's almost you go back into that contemplation phase
Right.
even after. So I think that's very interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's an identity with work.
Yes.
And when that identity goes away, no surprise that you're going to feel a little lost. You're going to feel a little like unwanted, sort of like, but then you look at people like, Grandma Moses, who started painting at 77. Now she was driven circumstance by arthritis, you know, and she's like, I've got to, I can't sew. She was like a seamstress or something. She couldn't do that anymore. But then she could manage a paintbrush, and
Ah,
thank goodness for that. And she was 77. So, and Paul Gauguin, he was I don't know, was he a attorney or a tax accountant or something very, you know, white collar, and he gave it all up and moved to wherever, Tahiti or something, and started painting himself. Or Dante wrote the Divine Comedy at 40.
right,
There's so much in the tank.
right.
But taking that time to allow, capture all of these gifts and skills and experiences that you have, and then be like, how can I serve? It's always back to not only others but myself. How can I have, because your career, it isn't necessarily in corporate America, but somehow there's a form of service that's going to be happening.
Well, and to your point, if you're not happy yourself, you're not going to be able to have a happy relationship with others, with your
Right.
spouse, with your kids. You're going to always have that inner turmoil until you actually figure that out. So if someone is listening to us that is in this contemplation or maybe close to doing a career change, I know that they have to go kind of back to contemplation where they
Right.
assess themselves and all that stuff. And then you said the second phase is moving into doing more external
Really, the
check.
third. First is the disruption, and you're like, holy crap, what just happened? Or
Okay.
what's happening to me that I'm not as excited about this anymore. Then the contemplation, yeah. And then stage 3 is discovery, those outer actions, very much and you move between 2 and 3. Like
Okay.
you'll be in, if you're contemplating and you're like, well, this sounds, so I always say the real, real advice I give people is follow the fun. What
Mm,
lights you up inside, and let
I
that
like that.
lead you to what's next for yourself. And sometimes it may lead you to, well, that's a nice hobby, but I don't think I want to do that, but you don't know sometimes. So you go out, you discover, you do, you find someone you admire that's doing the work that you're considering, and you see if they'll do a coffee chat with you or something. And
Mm,
then as you're talking to them, you're like, you can feel again. I'm about the body compass. Using your body as your guide, and because
yes.
I believe that's the real truth teller. And again, out of the left brain stuff, but this imagination and expanded consciousness, and then your body with not only your physical feelings, but these sort of I'll call them spiritual senses that happen, intuition and that sort of thing. So, so you're going out, you're doing these third stage discovery actions, and then it's sort of, well, first of all, you might become attached to that idea, and then it's sort of deflating again. You might find yourself back in, disruption, like, oh God, but then then you move back into contemplation, like that wasn't it, and that's okay. But you get to sort of check it off the list and be like, okay, what else? What's next? What am I missing? Sort of asking these open-ended questions, and journaling, and walking around, a lake, thinking about, who am I? Who do I want to be? How do I want to serve? How do I want to use what I have to make money? Because I'm all about making more money, you
Mhm.
know if that's important to you and your family at this point. It may or may not. You may have been one of those brilliant people who set themselves up really well financially, and then they can explore more of those hobbies, or volunteer work and things like that. Or, making money, doing a career that serves you and serves others, feeling confident in yourself, you
Mhm.
know.
So
So
I like the fact that you said a few things about the contemplation, because I think when we tell people contemplate, like figure out what you want to do, it's a little bit overwhelming sometimes. Okay, well, great. How do I do that? But you said a couple concrete things. You said journaling. Journaling is really big because it's a matter of you just writing out, just it's almost like a brain dump, just
yeah,
brain dumping and just writing everything out, getting it out on paper, and then maybe reading over it to see what came out. And then the second one is walking, like walking in nature. And I think I do better walking outside when I don't have plugs in my ears for
right.
anything. It's like I have the ability to talk to God, to look at the trees, to look at the sky, to really, get outside of my brain. Because even when I feel, sometimes I feel like I'm walking outside, but I have stuff on my headphones. I'm listening to a podcast, and I'm so busy with the podcast that I miss everything that I just saw. I was like, I have no idea how I got home. It's one of those
Right.
things.
Absolutely. I think lots of people can relate to that for sure. So I think it is really important to disconnect from stuff being fed into your brain. Like, I love podcasts, obviously. I love podcasts
Yeah.
and I learn a ton, but there's time for that. And then but there's also time, and you'll know it again, that we're just getting quiet
Hmm.
and allowing this grander intelligence
Yes.
to guide you. I have like, this, this is an auger shell. There's a story behind, I say this in my website somewhere, like, I love miracle stories. This is one of mine. Just ask. You guys want to know? You guys, gals want to know? Email me, I'll tell you. But the point is that when you're out there, you're journaling or you're out walking in nature and quiet, being in meditation, all of a sudden something, you're thinking about, and then boom, an auger shell. And you're like,
Right.
oh my gosh, that's a snake runs across your path. And you can make the connection of the meaning, the metaphoric meaning.
Right.
And those, to me, those are gold too. Metaphors, animals giving you signs, coincidences, songs on the radios. These are things that when you're quiet and not all the outside stuff going on, all of a sudden those answers that you've been seeking start to come to you.
Oh my gosh, I love that. And that's happened to me so many times
Yeah.
too. And it's when it happens, you're like, oh wow, that's why that happens. So it's
Yeah. And
actually,
then you think, that it'll never happen again, but it wants to happen all the time for
yeah,
us. It's like, oh my gosh, it's
yes.
here for us,
I,
the
I
divine.
love it. I love the whole meditation and just, being quiet and journaling. So
Yeah.
all that's great. Okay. So you also said start talking to people. And I think this is one of the key things. And even this could be happening even during the contemplation,
Yeah.
because when you
You
start,
kind of go back and forth,
right,
right?
right, right.
And it
Yeah.
could
So
be like,
I like that. So when you start talking to people and you start asking the questions, like you said, you could kind of figure out what you don't want to do. And
yep,
when you figure out what you don't want to do, that's actually helpful, because then that starts narrowing the field on what you do want to do. Would you agree with that?
absolutely. I mean, it's all about clarity, right? And when you're feeling unclear, nothing wrong with that. It can feel uncomfortable for sure. Everyone wants to be here, but hates what's in the middle, the messy middle. And I always say, it's part of the process of life is really getting comfortable with the uncomfortable. And
Mhm.
so, you know, um, and so clarity comes through exploration. What is it, Thomas Edison? I didn't make any mistakes. I just found out 1,000 ways not to do that. And
Exactly.
that's really what it's about, is don't look at it as a waste of time, a waste of energy. You keep saying to yourself, now I'm even more clear. I'm even more clear. That's good for them, not for me. I think Amy Schumer said that.
Yeah,
I love her.
that's
Amy Poehler, one of those Amy's. I love that
yeah,
quote. Good
that's
for you, not
fantastic.
for me.
Okay, so let's talk. So obviously talking to people is going to be one thing. So once we move from, the contemplation to the stage 3, the
Discovery. Mhm.
discovery, what are some concrete things that you can do? And obviously you already said hiring a coach is good because we can kind of guide you on what you need to do. But if you want to do it on your own, what are some things that you can do in the discovery?
Well, the internet is a great resource for, if you're thinking to yourself in discovery, because you and I are both very focused on the career side. So, and if you go to the quiz and you take the quiz and you happen to be in career discovery stage, it'll give you some of those, some ideas that I can't even remember right now. Great. But when you're thinking about that, so, and again, from the viewpoint of a career, things, informational interviews, using the internet to just look up job titles and be like, okay, what are those job titles and what do those people do? And then you start to think about your transferable skills. And so there's this practical side of things, you might do, I do an exercise, again, the spiritual, but it's ideal career. And, so you might start to think about, well, if I had my ideal career, what would my salary be? Where would I be working? Would I be working, and how would I be getting there? Would I be taking the train downtown, Chicago, or would I be flying a lot, because I, want to those, or am I working from my home office? And what am I wearing? Who do I see when I walk into my office? Is it on the screen? I see Rosie and her and I are talking, doing our one-on-one check-in for the day. Or, do I see my journal on my desk where I'm, writing? I mean, so salary, location, how you're doing that, who you're working with, what you're doing. So, what are those things that you can get rid of? I mean, you're at a perfect place where you can sort of look at these activities and you're like, I used to love, managing teams. I'm sort of done with that.
Yeah. Oh gosh. Yeah.
And so then you move that off the list, right? So you're doing this ideal career, again, that sort of contemplation, but it leads you into, okay, now I'm thinking about this differently, my career. Then that will point you to, who should I talk to? What job titles might I look at? What career coach is best for me right now for where I'm at? Because there's great coaches at different places. Like you and I are, similar, lots of similarities as far as our perspectives and how we connect with people, for sure, but also different skills. Your remarkable career is different than mine.
Right.
And so, and then you're looking at, oh gosh, beyond the, what, again, that career mission I talked about. So what values, do you want to make sure the company has that align with your values? What mission are they going after that you can fully get behind? So you start looking at all of these, and you start doing these actions of finding companies that have similar values, finding companies that are, that have missions. Maybe there's social justice missions, or maybe it's women in tech missions, or maybe it's just technology, whatever. But then you start to know, okay, these are the industries that I want to focus on as I begin this next thing. Maybe it's that you've been thinking about that side hustle of yours, that hobby, turning it into, a real career, and getting a coach that can help you as an entrepreneur might be a really good thing, or taking some business classes. Maybe it's time to go back for a certain certification. So all of those activities, but don't, what I call practical, but don't forget about the magical or spiritual side of really building that muscle of your inner compass, so that you can almost discern, or definitely discern, between this is sort of a should, or, maybe I'll, even though the ego sometimes gets a bad rap, it's sort of an egoic decision that isn't necessarily really settling in with my true nature again, like It may sound good on paper, but your body, that inner compass is going to be like collapsing in on you. Your throat's going to start to close. You're going to feel a pain in the neck, you're like, what's happening? The universe is talking.
Yeah, absolutely. So listen to your gut, because
Listen.
your gut is going to talk to you. And if you feel an ick factor in your gut, then follow that because it's trying to tell you
Right.
something for sure.
During that discovery stage, when you're having lots of outer actions, keep coming back to that. And again, you can go back at the end of the day and say, what did I really enjoy about that conversation? What did I like about, those job descriptions I was reading? What did I like about those companies? What didn't I?
Right.
What are some yellow flags? What do I need to explore more? What are some other questions I need to create during the interview process to make sure that this flag, this thing that came up, is it valid, or is it as valid in that I just need to ask the question for clarity? And once that, it's like, phew, peace.
Yeah. And I just posted an article on LinkedIn, and I've been saying to people, once you're in the interview stage part, when you are going to talk to somebody, you need to be able to articulate your worth with massive confidence and conviction. So
Yep.
I put an article, but I noticed that you also released an article about the dreaded "tell me about yourself" question.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about, maybe one or two things that people can talk to the manager when someone asks them in the interview, "Tell me about yourself"?
Well, first and foremost, you're going to get that question.
Mm-hmm.
So be ready. And one of the things, again, as a recruiter who's coached a lot of people, interview prep and having confident interviews, as well as negotiating confidently. But that question, tell me about yourself, needs to be clear, succinct, and complete. So what happens is that people can get off on a tangent, and you have a 30-minute call, and all of a sudden you've spent 5 of those 30 minutes telling them about yourself.
Right.
And so being very clear, and so spending a few minutes just writing, and I'm sure in that article I probably gave a formula. I'm a big formula person. I don't have it in front of me, so maybe we can post a link to that in the blog.
Yes, we can do that for sure.
That would be great. And because when I do my blog, I'm like, I always like to say, okay, try this, so do this, do this, do this. But I'm sure that there was, a step that says, this is who, tell me about yourself. First of all, sometimes they want personal, sometimes they don't.
Right.
So you can always get a clarifying question in there. Do you want me to focus on career, or, a little bit more than that? And they'll say, oh, tell me it all,
Yeah.
Again, even though, but you want to be very cognizant of the time, because there's important stuff you want to get to about the job and your skills and abilities. But this is also an important piece. So you might say, simply, well, I went to the University of Texas and got a degree in business with an emphasis on computer information systems, was a programmer, wasn't my thing, so then I got into recruiting. So you're giving just a very brief, you don't have to go into all the details. Right. And then you end it with, I can go into more details on any of those points if you like.
Got it.
And then you've thrown the ball back to them. And that way they can continue to guide and direct the interview. And if there is something, and you can do that sort of technique throughout an interview process. They're asking you, well, I see in your resume that you worked on this project. What can you tell me about that? So again, you don't want to give too little information where they feel like they're pulling teeth to get info out of you, but you don't want to give so much that the interview gets used up with answering, one question. So there's that fine line between those two. And so I always say that's a great technique to say, I can go into more detail if you like, or did that, did that answer your question? Because again, communication, they may have been specifically asking about something that you heard differently. No one's fault.
Right.
You just heard it differently than what they were intending. And if you've now spent 10 minutes answering the question sort of different than their intention, now what?
Yeah.
Right. So I guess that's my thing.
You don't know if some people go, well, I was born in Chicago, Illinois.
Right.
How
Oh,
far back
I
do you
have people, oh, believe me, I'll look at the clock sometimes and it's fun because, I use this as a boundary setting exercise. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
how do you, gracefully cut someone off
Right.
because, and then I use it as a coaching moment. I'm like, okay, we're only to, 1996 here and I've only got 5 more minutes. So, whatever. So, yeah.
So along the interviewing thing, I always tell people, I think a lot of people or a lot of managers, interviewers want to see how you actually react in a specific situation. So what I recommend people is go online. There's a million different types of behavioral interview questions. Answer 30 or 50, something like that, if it's a long period of time. But just sit in front of the TV, have the questions and then just write them out. And the only reason why I ask them to do that is because it gives them ideas of stories that they can pull from their past and kind of write them out. And that serves them because when you're asked about a situation, now you have a bank of stories to actually bring forth.
That's such good advice, Rosie. I mean, I always say you want to have sort of the story, the real success achievement story. You also want to have the story where you overcame something.
Exactly.
And even a result that didn't quite come as planned, but what you learned out of it. So if you're having some of those stories that sort of in your back pocket, and behavioral interviewing, they've been around for a long time. It's really, past performance predicts future performance. And I think that there's real truth to that, because if you've never been faced with something before, then it's your first time. Doesn't mean you're not super capable of figuring things out, but if this company knows they're walking into this, they may want someone who's seen some of the, obstacles and potential pitfalls, before. And if you have, so I always say that job description. So practicing those stories just in general, like you said, great idea. Having 2 or 3 really good career stories in your back pocket that you can describe succinctly, clearly. And then looking for the job you're interviewing for, look at that job description, look at those duties and sort of next to it, right? Oh, I did that at ABC company, and we saved this. And what are those outcomes? We saved this much time, this much money. We created an innovation that the company hadn't thought about, or we brought a new line of business came out of that. So you're looking down the duties and you're tying your stories to that job description. I tell my candidates that job description will serve you through the whole interview process. Absolutely. Every question and they've generally spent a lot of time crafting those job descriptions. Sometimes they use an old job description over and over and over again. Right. That's super frustrating. But part of the interview process is you'll be like, I went through the job description very thoroughly. Is there anything, on there that you feel are the top priorities? I'd love to make sure we're addressing them. It's, the interview is very much a back and forth. They're learning about you, you're learning about them, so having questions is super important. Even if you've covered everything, you're like, I don't even think I can think of another question. Come up with another question.
Yes.
And, you always want to, and first of all, it shows engagement, shows interest, and if you can't think of anything else, ask them about themselves. What was one thing you wish you would have known, about this team or this company before you joined that you know now, or what's one thing that happily surprised you, or, because you want to end on a high note.
Sure.
What's, what was the best advice you got in your career?
Right. And, or you can always say, why are you still here? Because they're obviously still there.
What keeps you here? What keeps you here? Exactly.
Okay. So what is your 4th stage then in your process?
Career love.
Career
love, so now you either are there right now, you're the person that isn't necessarily pursuing new opportunities. Like you are going home and that glass of wine is super satisfying. It's not, numbing you.
Right.
It's more joyful. You know, because it stinks if I don't drink, but I know, that that can be a real pleasure. And if unfortunately now it's just the numbing substance you're using, it ruins the wine,
Right.
So, but so you might be that person that is really happily engaged in their work, is loving the project that they're on, or the projects that they're doing, the team, the mission of their company. So you might be really loving that stuff. Yet, there's more you can do. First of all, you want to continue to keep sort of career advancement on the radar screen.
Yes.
And that's, I know where you'll come in. How do they keep making sure that they're getting access to the right people, that they're getting on glamour projects,
Right.
that, those sorts of things. So, so you want to continue to do that. You may really look at ways to give back. So I mentor for Chicago Executives Club and Chicago Innovation, looking at opportunities to mentor, and guide those that are coming up behind you, especially as women, is so important. So when you're in that stage of career love, giving back, that's a really opportune time to do that. Not saying, I mean, you want to do it all the time, but that's a really great time, I think, to think about extending outside of just advancing your career and giving back to your company, but looking a little broader. And, really thinking about the things that are bringing you joy now, making sure that your life balance is there, that I call it work-life alignment, and that, you may have climbed the ladder a little bit, and that's okay. That could have been the thing. I mean, when I was building my, you don't build a business and, well, maybe you do, but I didn't. Smarter people than I, right? But I was like, I mean, it was everything to me. But I loved it. I would think about, I need something on that wall.
Right.
That I'm going out picture shopping this weekend. I'm going to go to some art galleries, to something like that, to, gosh, our employee manual is really deficient, and I want to start to update that, or hire a firm to help me to update that. And so, it's all consuming. But then at some point, if you're experiencing some of those draining energies, maybe work is taking up too much. And when you're in career love, exploring hobbies, going on, trips, spending time with family, figuring that out, because there may be a time when you're in stage one,
Right.
and that
Exactly.
you have created this full and complete life for yourself. That stage one will not throw you off your center at all. It'll be like, wow, I now get a chance to do something different. How exciting is that? And that different could be 80% of what you're already doing, but there's that 20% that you have a chance to have some agency over. And it's just like,
Yeah.
fun.
Well, I love all that. Like, I specifically want to point out that it's important for me as well to bring women that are coming up behind me, up, because my whole mission is women supporting women. And there's this author, her name is Rachel Hollis, and she actually said, women that don't support women should go to hell. And I'm like, oh, okay. But yeah, so I think it's really important for us, especially like I'm in the, bottom half of my career, and I am so passionate about helping other women coming up and knowing that they have to advocate for themselves, because some people may be in career love, but they don't know how to get to that next level. And that's kind of
Right.
where I come in about, making sure that you advocate for yourself, having advocates, having sponsors, all that good stuff. So
Yeah, and
well,
there's things, as you go through, again, we don't know what we don't know. That's
right.
why coaches are so awesome, and mentors and sponsors within your organization. Use all of those resources as women, and really we want to help, and it's just gonna serve you, and then of course you can serve others.
Absolutely. Well, Laurie, this has been an amazing conversation, but I am going to ask you if you can think of two concrete things that someone can use in their careers, two tips that you think would be useful to someone that is, in that I'm not really 100% happy with my career. What can I do? Can you give me two actionable items that people can use?
On the practical side,
Yes.
talk to someone, a career coach, an old boss, and start to, get some support in where you're at, and then trust the process is the more, unpractical in some ways. It's really difficult sometimes to believe that you're being held through this process, but you are, and that the things that you need are coming to you. The people, the doors will be opening, the resources, all of those things are coming to you, are available to you when you can detach from the outcome, rest in the process. It isn't passive.
Right.
There's actions, but again, the more connected you are to your body compass, the more you'll know, like, oh, this is a time to rest. Oh, this is a time to act.
Exactly.
And you'll be more and more clear on yourself. So that's it. Get support from women like Rosie, and reconnect with your essential self and allow that to guide you forward.
I love that. Oh my gosh. Laurie, this has been an incredible conversation. I hope it has been helpful for many of you. Again, I am going to have all of Laurie's contact information in my blog at the nowomanleftbehind.com website. So with that, Laurie, any final words?
No, I just thank you for what you're doing. Keep doing it. The more goodness we put in the world,
absolutely,
the better.
What a great conversation with Laurie Swanson. I told you that if you are thinking of switching careers, Laurie would be the perfect person to guide you to your next career. Obviously, we went through the 4 cycles of the career transition, and I think those 4 cycles are each cycle in and of itself is so valuable. Now, once you get to the career love stage, like she had said, it's not a time for you to just stop. Now, the difference between Laurie's coaching and my coaching is that she can help you figure out what your passion, that true nature from within, how you can use that true nature to match it to a career that you love. And that's what we're all about, right? Is trying to find a career where you're happy and fulfilled. Whereas for me, I'm not so much helping people find their passion, but once you actually find the career that you love, I help you move up that corporate ladder. And so that's the difference between Laurie's coaching and my coaching. So to wrap this episode up, I'm going to recap the 2 tips that Laurie provided us. The first one, she said, talk to a career coach. And of course, I'm going to be biased towards that, meaning get the support that you need. Sometimes you don't know how to get to that next level without talking to someone that can help you, support you, coach you. Tip number 2 is trust the process. I totally get and realize that this is not an actionable tip, but it is still so valuable because you are being, like Laurie, what she said was that you are being held through the process. So the things that you need are coming to you. One of the things that I always hear is things are happening for you, not to you. So that's what she means by that. Trust the process. Know that you are going to be exactly where you are supposed to be. And I'm going to add tip number 3 on there is to continue to meditate, because when you meditate, you let those creative juices come around. And like I was talking to Laurie in the episode, sometimes when I go for a walk and I have a podcast, I'm listening to a podcast, I miss that time where I can be creative and think about ideas because I'm so focused on the podcast. So I have been trying to walk outside without listening to anything. Just be in nature, appreciate the trees, the flowers, the sky, my dog, whatever's happening around me. So with that, I hope that you really enjoyed this conversation. Laurie is amazing. All of her contact information is going to be on my website, nowomanleftbehind.com. And if you have any topics or ideas that you want me to cover, please send me an email or a DM. I'm on LinkedIn. And of course, all my contact information is on my website as well. So with that, remember to be brave, be bold, and take action.
Thank you for listening to this episode. Let these stories of self-encouragement and professional development serve as a guide in navigating through corporate America in the most practical and fulfilling way possible. Do not forget to subscribe to the show at nowomanleftbehind.com for more content like this. Leave a rating and share it with your friends because we want to make sure that no woman is left behind. Until I see you next time, remember to be brave, be bold, and take action.